Nokia was once the biggest and most powerful mobile phone company on planet Earth. By 2007, they controlled nearly half of all smartphone sales. But less than 6 years later, their entire mobile phone business collapsed so completely that they were forced to sell their entire mobile division to Microsoft for practically nothing. This wasn't merely a loss of market share or even just a decline into irrelevance. It was one of the most dramatic corporate collapses in business history. But here's the thing, Nokia isn't dead. In fact, today, Nokia is experiencing a massive, almost unnoticed rebirth and total domination in several major new fields. So in this video, we not tell you the incredible story of Nokia's quiet rise from the ashes of their own failure. Taking a look back, the seeds of Nokia's self-inflicted destruction were already present long before Apple launched the iPhone in 2007. Deep inside the halls of Nokia, a corporate monster was slowly growing that would eventually devour the company entirely. We're talking about crippling bureaucracy, perpetual internal warfare, and a suffocating lack of innovation. In retrospect, these problems go all the way back to the early days of Nokia as a whole. Although their modern success started with the explosion of the mobile phone market in the late 90s. And early 2000s, Nokia had been around since 1865 as a paper mill in Finland. Over time, they expanded into rubber boots, cables, and finally electronics. They were actually a relative newcomer to the mobile phone game. And although they did introduce some early iconic models, their first smash hit didn't come until 1992 when they released the Mobira Senator. Despite being bulky, expensive, and very limited in functionality, the Senator was the best-selling phone in Finland and made Nokia into a European wireless leader. This led them to expand to America, where they continued to gain traction throughout the mid to late 1990s. But despite their initial success, there was always a dark cloud hanging over Nokia. If you ask any old Nokia fan or employee, they'll be quick to admit that yes, Nokia did make some great phones, but the company itself was a confusing jumble of incompetence, denial, and internal conflict. For example, a key part of the problem was that Nokia was utterly crippled by layers upon layers of bureaucracy. If management wanted to make a single change to a phone, it could take 18 months for that change to get approved and then physically implemented. So if you needed to add a feature or fix a bug, you basically had to wait 6 months, then do it. Then wait another 6 months for it to actually appear on the phone. On top of that, Nokia suffered from a sort of reverse Steve Jobs effect. Instead of being the visionary surrounded by a team of competent engineers, Nokia had brilliant engineers trapped underneath a huge pile of incompetent managers. These layers of management insulated the executives from reality, resulting in absolute cluelessness among upper management. For example, Nokia executives were literally told that the iPhone wasn't a threat because it used an Intel processor. This means that Nokia executives actually believed that the iPhone couldn't compete with Nokia because Nokia had developed their own superior ARM-based processors in-house. As a result of this disconnect, Nokia was essentially burning through 1/3 of all global phone R and D money each year. Yet they couldn't ship a single device that customers actually wanted. This issue was only made worse by Nokia's infamously slow innovation cycle. While competing companies like Samsung and Apple were able to leverage economies of scale to rapidly iterate on popular products, Nokia never got the memo. Their main slogan during the 2000s was "Don't change what you've done," which makes you wonder if someone was actually getting paid to spell out their own demise. But perhaps the biggest obstacle to Nokia's growth was their infamous not-invented-here disease. Like many large corporations, Nokia often bragged about their internal R&D departments. But unlike those companies, Nokia took things to an extreme. Nokia stubbornly refused to use anything created outside their walls and insisted on reinventing every wheel badly. For example, Nokia refused to use Linux or Android and instead doubled down on their own doomed operating systems. All of this brings us to Nokia's doomed operating systems. As Nokia floundered, they internally developed multiple different operating systems simultaneously, and these efforts were crippled by office politics and fear of change. Their main operating system was Symbian, which debuted in 1998. By the time the iPhone came along, Symbian was already more than a decade old. On paper, Symbian was technically capable of running the same applications as iOS or Android. But in practice, Symbian was a technological zombie, a fractured mess built for the ancient world of physical keyboards and tiny screens. Luckily for Nokia, they had a secret weapon in the form of a second operating system called MeeGo. MeeGo promised to overcome all of Symbian's limitations and be a true competitor to iOS and Android. But unfortunately, MeeGo was canceled due to political infighting. The main reason for this infighting was that MeeGo was based on an open-source platform called Fremantle, which was also used by Nokia's direct competitor, Sony Ericsson. For whatever reason, Nokia couldn't stand the idea of using a platform that Sony Ericsson was also using, even though Symbian was also based on a third-party kernel called PNX. Not to mention that Nokia had previously purchased Symbian from a British software company. All of this petty infighting among managers kept Nokia from releasing anything truly competitive, until it was too late. By 2011, Nokia's smartphone business was bleeding market share every month, and desperate times called for desperate measures. In September 2010, Nokia hired Stephen Elop, a Microsoft executive, as CEO. This immediately sparked wild conspiracy theories. Given that Elop's background was in Microsoft software and devices, not Nokia hardware, shortly after his arrival, he sent out an infamous memo titled Burning Platform declaring that Nokia was on fire and slowly burning to the ground. This was a blatant lie designed to scare Nokia employees into submission, but it ended up destroying employee morale and sending a crystal clear signal to competitors. Nokia was in full panic mode. Over the next year, Elop fired 18,000 Nokia employees, shut down their promising MeeGo platform, and killed the Symbian operating system. In January 2011, he gave the remaining employees an ultimatum: switch to Windows Phone or get out. In hindsight, this was probably the dumbest decision in corporate history. Elop proceeded to torch everything good about Nokia and replace it with a new platform that had zero chance of competing. So why would he do such a thing? Well, some say that Elop was a legitimate genius who simply recognized that Symbian and MeeGo were doomed, and the only way to save Nokia was to switch to Windows Phone. Others claim that Elop was Microsoft's Trojan horse, a sleeper agent planted to destroy Nokia from within so Microsoft could buy the pieces for cheap. And given how much Elop hated Symbian and MeeGo, it's impossible to rule out this conspiracy theory entirely. Whatever the case, Elop proceeded to wager the entire company on a platform that barely existed and had zero market traction. And in February 2012, Nokia announced that they would abandon their own operating systems and fully embrace Windows Phone as their sole mobile platform. This was effectively corporate suicide disguised as strategy. And if the nail in the coffin wasn't obvious enough, the Windows Phone 7 that Nokia ran was embarrassingly primitive. For example, It couldn't even handle a simple copy and paste function, something that BlackBerry had been doing since 1997. To make matters worse, the Windows Phone lacked apps, a camera, a proper browser, and even multitasking, all while costing twice as much as competing devices. Despite the gorgeous hardware, the Lumia phones ran an OS that felt like it was designed by aliens. To add insult to injury, Elop's radical restructuring resulted in mass layoffs, killing the very talent that had made Nokia successful in the first place. It should come as no surprise that this wasn't exactly a huge hit. The Windows Phone platform was utterly decimated by iOS and Android, and Nokia's smartphone market share collapsed from 33% to just 3%. Meanwhile, Elop was widely mocked as the man who killed Nokia. With that, the Finnish press began labeling Elop as a Trojan horse, a Microsoft spy planted to destroy Nokia from within so Microsoft could buy the pieces for cheap. And this conspiracy gained credence in September 2013 when Microsoft announced that they would acquire Nokia as device division for $7.2 billion. Given how Nokia had lost 90% of their market share and virtually all of their engineering talent, this was a steal from Microsoft. But what Microsoft didn't realize was that they were also buying a ticking time bomb. Just 18 months after the deal closed, Microsoft announced a $7.6 billion write-off of the Nokia acquisition. That's right! Microsoft paid $7.2 billion for Nokia, and then immediately lost $7.6 billion due to the Nokia purchase. That's how bad things were. In the end, Microsoft ended up spending over $10 billion to dismantle what they had just bought, including firing thousands of former Nokia employees. By 2016, the Windows Phone platform captured just 0.7% of global smartphone sales, making Microsoft completely irrelevant in mobile. Elop himself quietly left Microsoft again in 2015. Having presided over the complete destruction of two phone businesses in just 5 years. Looking back, it is hard to believe that Nokia ever dominated the phone market given how pathetically small their current market share is. According to Counterpoint's research, Nokia only captured 1% of global smartphone sales in 2022. But here is the thing, Nokia is dead. In fact, today, Nokia is silently dominating a number of major new fields. The key to Nokia's survival was that they had one critical asset that Microsoft didn't buy, their networks division. In 2015, Nokia struck back with a 15.6 billion euro masterstroke by acquiring Alcatel-Lucent, instantly transforming Nokia from a has-been phone company into a 5G telecommunications superpower. This was revenge. Today, Nokia Networks is the world's third largest telecom equipment manufacturer powering AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and hundreds of other carriers worldwide. They hold over 4,000 crucial 5G patents and are well on their way to becoming a truly invisible giant of the digital age. It is almost painful to look at Nokia as financial statements because they read just so small compared to their glorious past. In their heyday, Nokia generated over 17 billion euros in annual revenue. But today, Nokia only generates 19.2 billion euros in annual revenue with 2.6 billion euros in operating profit. So why do we consider this a victory for Nokia? Because they've built a more efficient business that's also remarkably lean and future-proof. For example, they still control nearly 100 of their networks division. They've successfully diversified into the patent licensing business. And they even managed to temporarily revive the Nokia brand with HMD Global. Speaking of which, in 2016, Nokia cleverly licensed their legendary brand name to HMD Global, a company run by former Nokia executives. Since then, HMD has released a series of Nokia-branded Android phones targeting the forgotten middle market with solid, affordable devices that actually work.